That struck me as a huge difference was the first time we saw one of the trails that you can walk. If y'all ever been to the mountains, there's a number of trails and you'll go, and he just kind of pulled over. It's like, oh man, let's go check that out. And I'm like, what? You know, we're not just getting to Gatlinburg, you know, kind of thing. And so this is a person who's always been able to slow down and smell the roses, kind of see the small things and all that. And I absolutely love that about him. And he has always loved plants, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about how he first got started with plants and it being a career for him, and until then breaking away from it, but always loving doing it, and then coming full circle back to he's the most passionate, the happiest right now in his older years as he's ever been, because he's really, really doing some stuff with his passion. And so I thought it would be good for you guys to see. I mean, young people, you have passions. Middle-aged people, your passions may change and evolve, and you may come back to something. But if you'll pay attention, as we're older, we can see in our lives, like Ms. Thompson's always loved art. You know, you've always loved reading. You know, we can talk about these things, and I've always been love to listen to people and talk with people and all that. So you start seeing patterns in your life. Pay attention to those patterns. That's what you're drawn to. That's some natural tendency, gift that you have. So his gift is with flowers, with plants, and I'm just going to turn it over and let you talk to them about your passion. That plant. Well, you're going to talk.
Understand that I am probably different than most people. I am a plant nut. I am consumed by the science of horticulture, of ecology, of botany. Have any of you, is there botany being taught? Biology, anybody taking biology?
Now, Mr. Jim teaches biology.
Well, I am completely consumed by the science of it, and have been, I guess, as far back as I can remember. And as a child, I grew up in a different part of the country. I finished high school here in New Albany, but I grew up in southeast Louisiana, and was blessed to have two older brothers that I was tagged along with wherever they went. And in southeast Louisiana, you know, Louisiana used to be known as the sportsman's paradise. Their license plate used to say the sportsman's paradise. And it was because of the abundance of wildlife that existed, and I suppose still exists in that state. I don't get down there much anymore. But it was a perfect environment for three young boys to have two older brothers, and such a blessing to have an area like I had to grow up with. My backyard, we didn't own it, and I say that kind of loosely. My backyard was 165,000 acres of wilderness. I could ride, and I say my backyard, but I could ride my bicycle just a little short trip, and to my immediate availability was 165,000 acres of just wilderness. And whenever we weren't involved with doing something with my dad, we began prodding my brother, come on, ask Dad if we can, you know, when we get through, can we go to the swamp? That's where we wanted to be, and that's where we were. If we weren't busy helping him, working around the house, doing whatever, we were heading to the swamp. To kind of put that in perspective, 165,000 acres, Union County, I think, is about 260,000 acres. So my backyard was more than half the size of Union County. You know, from East Union to West Union to Inglemoor to South Tippah County, that's what I had. That's what I had to explore. And explore, we did a lot of. You know, whenever work was over and my oldest brother Butch got brave enough to ask my dad, can we go? Can we go to the swamp? And Dad would say, yeah, go ahead. Be sure to take your little brother, and also be sure to take that rifle with you. We always went with a rifle, never used it much, but that was just part of the conditions of letting us go. And to this day, my parents were strict. They were really strict people. And to this day, I cannot understand how they let us go.
3 boys and a gun.
They let us go to the swamp. Because when I say it was fraught with danger, I'm being honest. People were getting lost on a regular basis in this wilderness that I call the swamp. I don't know if any of you ever seen this reality show called Swamp People. Any of you ever watched that? One of the families fishes and hunts in what's called the Honey Island Swamp. Well, that's the swamp I grew up in. They're on the southern portion of it, we were on the northern portion. That's where I grew up. It was swamp, bayou, and just an amazing place, full of animals and full of adventure. Anytime that we had the opportunity, we were in it, and blessed as I was, I could tag along with my two older brothers, whether they wanted me there or not. You know, being the youngest, I don't know if any of you ever heard this before, but when you're walking down these trails that are about so wide and just covered with brambles and brush, the saying was that snakes always bite the second person first. Being the youngest, guess who was always second? My older brother led the way, I'm in the middle, Bruce behind me. We'd jockey for that position, and if I complained enough, maybe I could pull up the rear at times. But I tell you all this because I know that it's these years that you're in right now that form a lot of who you're going to become. And it was those experiences, I know, that gave me such an ease, such a comfort of being out in absolute wilderness. To this day, if I'm out hiking, if I'm in the mountains, I want to explore the deepest, darkest forest there is, and as close that I get to being lost, the happier I am. That's where I want to be. That's my comfort spot, surrounded by what God has given. So these things, all these experiences, walking through the swamp with, you know, my brother leading the way, and we all feeling safe because he was like, who's the kid on Sandlot that's the hero? That was my brother. He was capable of doing anything. And when we walked across the swamp, you know, we'd head out with the pretension of going fishing. That's how we got the excuse to leave. But we were really just going exploring. We may fish a little bit. But I do recall fishing one bank and my brother constantly looking around trying to find another bank to fish off of. And I'm like, Butch, let's just stay here, man. No, we're going across the swamp. And here we go wading across like, you know, soldiers in the Marines or something with our fishing poles up and the rifle held up. But my big brother leading the way with a long stick banging in the water just so the alligators or the snakes or whatever would hear us coming. That's where we were as kids, 10 or 12 years old, but loving it, absolutely loving it. And, you know, I've seen, and these are things that come back to me as I age, and the same thing that happened to you as you age. I saw so much. I saw so much of what God blessed us with in this country. I witnessed, it may be fearful to you now, but I witnessed alligators, you know, on a bank so thick they're like stepping stones. And I've seen, during the wintertime, ducks would come into that area. Wood ducks, such a beautiful, beautiful bird. They would come into that area in numbers so thick it's like it would shade the sun. There would be so many of them. You could stand here and talk with somebody, you couldn't hear them because of the raucous emotions of, I don't know, 200,000 ducks. And in the springtime, you think of a swamp or a bayou just being this dark, mysterious place. In the springtime, it would come alive with flowers just like anywhere else on the planet. You know, just like here in Union County, in the springtime, everything burst open with flowers, and it's such a contrast to the swamp that you're traipsing around in the winter, dismal, dark, gray, frightening, and then it comes alive with these beautiful flowers. Been a walker, a hiker. I've done a lot of backpacking. I think the Smoky Mountains, you know, they've got like 1,200 miles of trails. I've done about 500 miles of them. I've been out in the woods a lot, and I generally am in the old days, back in the 70s, like me a tree hugger. You know, I'm gonna hug this tree so the chainsaw doesn't chop it down. If you're gonna chop the tree down, you're gonna chop me down with it. That sort of thing. I relate to those people, even though I don't think I would actually do that. I do relate to their concern for trees, because most of us really don't understand, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. Most of us really don't understand why God gave us trees, why God gave us flowers, why God gave us a plant like that, which that's called a serviceberry, that grows in our woods around here. Matter of fact, Benjamin Franklin called that America's best fruity tree. Nobody knows about it, but it has a wonderful berry on it. It's like blueberries. Where was I? I'm lost now. We're talking about taking these pictures. Okay,
Yeah.
This is how I came about it. I am a walker. When I get the opportunity, I go to this ironwoods here, and which really isn't that often, but when I do have the opportunity, I go to it and I go for walks. That's where I am at peace. Even though, you know, I have some man cave at home, now we've moved away from that. And that's not to say that it's something that you'll understand when you're older and possibly when you're married. I'm totally at peace being around that. But we all need our alone time, I guess. And my alone time, I like to spend right here. I like to spend in the woods. And I have always admired trees for their beauty, their power, their strength. They have a soul to me. I am odd that way. But this one winter day, and this is how it all came about, and I'm going to tell you the story because I got to talk 45 minutes. I'm going for a walk in our woods, and it is probably about mid-March. That's one of my favorite times to be in the woods, when the buds on the trees are just starting to swell a little bit, and they etch all these beautiful lines against a gray winter sky. It's so beautiful to me. I find beauty in everything I see when I look in the woods. All the lines, the shades, and all the different shapes. But I'm walking on this day with my head up, looking at the trees, and man, what a beautiful, you know, just that sort of thing. That's how my walks go about. I know every tree in our woods. I have a personal relationship with every tree in our woods. I stop by and say, how are you doing today? You look wonderful to me.
We're glad he's alive when he's done.
Spend this time together, and I've got to move on. We've got other trees. But this day, I guess, and for the sake of telling the story, my nose itch, I'm sorry. For the sake of telling the story, I'm walking with my head up, looking at the trees again, and I stumble, and that's probably got something to do with age, I don't know. That's probably been 3 years ago. Snagged by a vine, I stumble and I kind of fall down, and I fall face first to this flower that's on the ground. Now, I'm a horticulturist. I know plants. But the plants I know is, well, they're termed ornamental plants. My study was ornamental horticulture. So, and horticulture is, what's the definition? The science that pertains to the germination and propagation of plant material. But I fall face first on this plant that's in full bloom in the middle of March, and I'm astonished by it. Because, like I say, I know plants. But I didn't know what this was. I didn't have a clue what it was, really. And I was really curious about it, but not so curious that I didn't get up and continue on my walk. But while I was walking, you know, my eyes and my head, my brain was going, no, what was that, you know? And I just kept on walking, and over the next hill I come across it again, and this time it's a whole wave of them. It wasn't just one plant, it was like 500 of them. I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out what this is. So I collect a sample and run back home and I identify it. And, you know, one thing leads to another. As smart as I am, I'm like, you know, if that's blooming now, what have I missed all this? Maintain our ecology. These are the ones, I've talked about how we've landscaped with plants from
Southeast Asia or Europe or wherever. The bad thing about that is that those exotic plants feed nothing. They feed, when we bring them here out of their environment into a new environment where they weren't placed originally, they feed nothing. Birds may eat a few of the berries. The odd thing is those that have berries, those exotic plants that have berries, they produce the berries at the wrong time of year, and the birds eat them, and then they have nothing during the wintertime. It's so perfect. I cannot tell you how perfect it is, and we've messed it up. And I don't point fingers, because I know we're supposed to advance and grow and develop and learn and succeed, and we are the greatest nation on earth. What I'm bringing to you today is an attempt to say, and you are young people, you need to understand, we do have it wrong. We do a lot that's wrong. There's no finger pointing going on. The only problem is now we know what we're doing, and we still do it. I don't understand that. I don't understand timber owners who clear cut their forests. I do not understand that. That is an ecological disaster every time you see a hardwood forest cut down to the ground. And from an economics perspective, why not select cut? Why not go in and take that tree, that tree, that tree, and have perpetual income for generations instead of chopping it down? Okay, I'm not preaching again. But
Now, he started taking these in March, early spring, just so y'all know as you're watching this, and it evolves from the early bloomers out in the woods.
yeah, these are all in
To
kind
the
of
fall. As they
seasonal orientation. Everything is from spring through the fall. And just like that plant, oh, we just missed it.
bloom.
The big mayapple is being studied for its use in cancer research. Very important plant. Buckeye right there, that's called red buckeye. Really cool plant. The American Indians used to gather the fruit off of that, crush it up, and throw it into a creek, and it stupefied the fish. It made the fish float up to the top of the surface, and then they'd just go grab the fish. That's
Really?
called buckeye right there.
That's my way of fishing.
That's how grab all the fish.
That's oxalis.
Scoop them up.
So we got some glitches in the program there. But I wanted to make sure that you understood about the monarch butterfly and that example. And that's an example that we hear quite often. And I think you hear that one quite often because we are familiar with monarchs and their journey.
Tell them about that plant.
But that is just, this one,
Yeah, that doll's eye.
that's doll's eye. The fruit on that, and it's called doll's eye. Pioneers used to gather that fruit, and if they were nicer to kids, they made their dolls and used that as the eyes in their doll. So the plant maintained. That plant right there is another toothache plant. See, I can get diverted on this.
Well, this is good stuff, though.
All right.
I mean, I love to hear about it.
It's called Solomon seal. When you break that stem down by the leaf node, it makes a seal that looks like the seal of Solomon. This is called, they're going with it.
I don't know what's going on with that. Somebody better than me might know. Technology-wise, better.
Would it be important for us to make sure that we maintain or become stewards to preserve such a depth? Well, you know that we have to have pollinators, right? We have to have the pollinating insects. If we don't have the pollinators, then you're going to have a hard time putting food on the table. We have to have the birds, because in nature there is the herbivores and carnivores, those that eat and those that get eaten. And without the birds, the insect population explodes. Again, it's perfect. It's a perfect design. This plant is a host plant. Host means a specific insect is completely dependent upon that plant being there. That is the host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly. That one is stalled right there. Oh, you.
Oh, I was
okay.
pausing so you could talk about it, but now we're going.
And ants form those seeds. It's called myrmecocori. They form those seeds. They gather the seeds, take them back to the nest. They eat the sugar coating that's around the seeds, and at the same time they are what's called scarifying the seed for our germination, and they're already underground, so they're being planted by ants.
Wow.
Spread about.
Nourishing the ants too.
Nourishing the ants. It's a symbiosis.
Wow, that's pretty.
It works. That's one of our trilliums. A lot of people, when they think about forest plants or shady plants, one of the first things they'll think about is trillium. We have 4 different kinds out there at the farm.
Sorry, it's cut me off again.
But what the important thing as far as what I really hope y'all understand is, first of all, God's design is perfect. It is perfect. Everything He created was with a purposeful intention. Everything He created has an intention. So, we're taught that we are. This is the plant that they're doing the cancer research with right now. Really promising protein that you get in that plant. It's
You
called
probably
Mayap.
have that growing in the woods near you.
It's really common. It's common around here on the shady hillside.
And how awesome is it to think you just had to fall face first into
Right.
the ground, that God already
Wake
had that
him up.
there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was a God
He
trick.
had it there.
Well, it was. You know,
Wow.
I've been in the woods for years.
Right.
And it was that day, that season of life, that little trip and fall that I totally just went this way.
The birdie.
I could tear up over that.
I know it.
That was something.
Anyway, I'm guilty of rambling when I'm talking to people, and I apologize. I hope you were able to follow some of it. But I hope you'll understand that it is so important that those of you who are planting around your house, it's so important that we start including some of these native plants, because our birds and our butterflies, I see today, or you see today, 60% less of the birds that I saw when I was your age.
That's scary.
60% less. In 1997, they keep a census on monarch butterflies. In 1997, it was recorded 1 billion monarch butterflies in the United States. In 2016, it was recorded 60 million. Do the math, somebody. That's more than a 90% decrease in the population. More than a 90%. Now, those are just indicators. That's the reason they study an insect such as, it's an indicator. If one is doing this, then there's got to be a lot of others doing the same, just declining.
So plant milkweed.
Plant milkweed
For that monarch butterfly.
monarch butterfly. Plant anything that's native, and natives are hard to find. Plant black-eyed Susan. You can find that. You can find those. Plant anything that supports an insect population, and by that way you're doing something. This is one thing that we can do something about. This is one thing that we can help, and that's where I am, just trying to ask people, don't go in and throw away your azaleas and whatnot, even though we do have native azaleas. I'm not saying tear out and redo. I'm just saying include. Try to include, and it will have a great effect. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much effort. The problem that we have is our ecology is fragmented. There's pieces here and pieces there and pieces there, and we can tie those pieces together just as residents in planting a few native plants.
they're hard to, like, when you go to Walmart or to the garden center and you're looking at all the pretty flowers, they're not natives, most of them. So the problem is they're not readily available for the customer to go in and buy. And so that's what Robert's working on now, is growing these native flowers. And the Audubon Society has asked him to grow for them because they can't produce enough for the customers that are wanting them. It's becoming really popular now. I mean, like, people are getting it, but there's not enough people growing them. And so,
People are getting it. Oxford in particular is developing a large greenway of native plants, and I would so love to see our community do the same thing.
yeah.
So did you transplant these plants from other places, or
Yeah.
were they just native to the?
No, you can transplant them.
farm?
No,
Most of them were.
this is just native there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you haven't transplanted from
I
other
haven't moved
places?
it, no. That's Indian pink. That is taken by women who are expecting children. Easiest thing.
Indian pink.
Indian pink. Well, it's all out there, and the deeper that you look, you know, all this stuff, all these medicinal plants, you know, our forefathers used them. They used them. This is not mythical science. They used them, and then you know, big corporate pharmaceuticals got involved with it, kind of pushed all that to a side. But now it's coming back. Now it's coming back, and people understand it for their own reasons. But from my perspective, understanding that God gave us all that we need. It's there.
You'll see it, you know, in the drugstores, you'll
Oh, yeah,
see
you can.
it, you know, you'll see these things are coming back, people are
You'll see
understanding.
some of them on the shelf, Golden Seal, you know, St. John's wort, all the kind of stuff you'll see on the shelf. I'm looking
Okay.
at the town.
Okay, I think we're good.